So pet peeves in politics.
So that was Paul Jacob telling me what we're going to call this episode of This Week in Common Sense. Pet peeves in politics. Seems reasonable. But after he told me that, I confessed to him that this week had gone by so fast that I sort of forgot most of what he wrote on thisiscommonsense.org this week. Well, what did he say in response? He didn't seem so peeved.
We're in kind of hyperspeed. And of course, as we tape this, we just found out that Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Supreme Court Justice, passed away today. And I think it was today. The announcement was today. And that sure enters, makes that Supreme Court issue a huge issue in this election. I think it already, is always a big issue. If anybody who's paying attention to politics and the power of the court, that is, it's so many decisions with political, blocks and Congress kind of always passing the buck. So many decisions are made in the courts, and so it'll be very interesting, and we'll see what happens. I certainly think. My first thought was, my goodness, the bullet we dodged in 2016, not electing Hillary Clinton president, is now a 3 Supreme Court justice bullet. So that's a good one to have dodged.
So I have actually a question about the politics of this. If I were in the Senate, since it's the Senate who puts the thing through, and the Republicans kind of own the Senate, right?
Well, no, they don't own the Senate, of course. They what will happen here is they will, they might attempt to filibuster, but of course the filibuster has been pulled back on Supreme Court nominations. I believe it's on Supreme Court, but if necessary, they will get rid of the filibuster. Democrats years ago got rid of parts of the filibuster. And if I remember correctly, I'm getting old. I have to always preface everything with I may be going crazy and not remember anything. But anyway, I believe that the Democrats pulled away the filibuster, saying you can't filibuster judicial nominations except for the Supreme Court. And then I believe the Republicans pulled it back on that. I may be wrong there, but if need be, I think the Republicans will. The filibuster is just a rule in the Senate. So the majority party can repeal that rule without minority party votes, and might do it on this. And frankly, I'd like it to be something other than a rule. I'd like that not to be the case. I'd like the American people to decide whether we want the Senate to have a filibuster, and give the Senate a filibuster if we want them to have it, and not allow them to have it if we don't want them to have it, instead of allowing kind of the politics to slap back and forth like a pendulum. And, it creates kind of this, now I'm going to grab some power. And I think we want to set our government in such ways that any power grabbing, you guys need to come to us, and not just muster a majority of votes in the Congress.
Well, the filibuster rule has been batted back and forth and taken down for the last several years, and Democrats recently have, is it Elizabeth Warren or somebody big in the candidacy for the presidency this year, was advising just to get rid of it entirely.
There has been some talk about that, and there's been, and I remember at one point Trump saying to Republicans, if they try to block, on something, and it may have been the Supreme Court. That's why I'm thinking I could be wrong, that they still have some sort of filibuster there. Although you would have thought if they had it, they would have used it on Kavanaugh. So anyway, I'm not sure what the reality is, what the law actually is, or what the rule is at this point. It's not a law, but I think any way you slice it, Republicans can, if there is a filibuster, they can overturn it by a simple rule change, and will do so likely. And I think you'll see a lot of people arguing, hey, you didn't let Merrick Garland, his nomination, go forward when Obama was president because it was an election year, supposedly. And I heard somebody talking today about how, well, no, the problem there was that it was 2 separate parties. whereas this time the Senate and the president is the same party. But of course, what that really says is, no, we had the power to stop you, and now you don't have the power to stop us. And it just seems to me, I actually called for Republicans to stop Merrick Garland in 2016. I didn't call for them to do it by blocking hearings and other things. I would have brought him through the hearings. I would have voted him down. And I would have made it clear to Obama that unless you're picking someone we really, really like, which means you might not like him so much, we're going to vote him down. It seems to me that's how you do it. You don't do it in some phony way where you block it. But of course, it's legal what they did. It's not like horribly unethical or something. It just seems to me that it's better politics and it's better government if you hold open votes and are clear we're voting against this person because we don't think he'll be a good justice. But anyway, at this point, of course, I think, and I'm shocked, frankly, at least a little bit, but Donald Trump is the only Republican president who has nominated 100% people who Republicans are pretty happy with. I mean, Reagan didn't do it. He got Kennedy. It seems like there was somebody else. And in fact, O'Connor, who Reagan picked, was a little mixed in terms of her decisions. And then you have Souter and others. Republicans have just made some really lousy picks. John Roberts comes to mind, George W. Bush, and Kavanaugh, and especially Gorsuch. I think Gorsuch is the best justice. I think Kavanaugh is, maybe the fourth best, maybe the third best, but it's a relative sort of thing. But again, I hope Trump nominates someone. They don't have to do it by election day, but I hope they nominate someone and put him on the court. And they may want to do it by election day, so it can't be said it was done by a lame duck Congress.
So that's the idea? Because I was wondering, would it be better to do it before or after the election?
Well, you could do it either way legally. I think politically, you're going to get all kinds of media storm and Democrats screaming. And there's a reality to American politics that I think there's a kind of a core feeling we all have that we would just like them to leave us alone. We've kind of fashioned a life out of this world, and we just generally don't want the government to screw it up. And so whoever seems to be on offense is immediately on defense because the country doesn't like politicians on offense, frankly. And so I think it has kind of a tendency in that way to hurt Republicans, to energize Democrats who say, oh, my goodness, this is why we got to get rid of Trump. And maybe Republicans say, well, we got our Supreme Court justice. Everything's going fine. I'm feeling pretty good. Oh, I was feeling so good, I forgot to get to the polls. So it's hard to know exactly how it works out. I do think picking a good justice who can't be demonized, which means a woman. I'm just putting it out there. She is female.
Well, there's a problem. This actually leads into Friday's piece. Hairdo don't, because you can demonize some women, as you pointed out.
That's right. You can't demonize women as a gender, as a sex, generally. But if they're white, you can demonize them. We were kidding earlier that maybe we should call this, pet peeves or something, pet peeves in politics, but which of course maybe is what we'll call it. But I've heard this Karen thing, and I'm a little slow to these things. The first time I mentioned it to my wife, she's like, well, I've heard that a zillion years ago. I mean, you're way behind, Paul. And a lot of times I am on these kind of things. But as soon as I heard it, I thought, this is emblematic of where we are as a society, that we have all kinds of rules, don't be mean to people, which, is okay. And the problem is that sometimes you take things like a joke, Don Rickles would be out in this day and age, and a lot of people would. And I think people were better able to laugh at themselves years ago than they are today. But if there's any good that would come out of this hypersensitivity to any offense, it would be not being offensive all the time. And yet then folks slap this Karen label. And, we all know Karens. I've never kind of thought, boy, Karens, everyone else in the whole world, male, female, every race, they're wonderful, except the people named Karen. That's the problem with the human race. So, but it seems like at the end of the day, as we point out in this commentary, quoting, what was her name with the Atlantic, Helen Lewis, who points out Karens, this is a direct quote, Karens are most definitely white. Let that ease your conscience if you were beginning to wonder whether the meme was perhaps a little bit sexist in identifying various universal negative behaviors and attributing them exclusively to women. And of course, that's the bottom line here. All of this is universal. You know what? Almost everybody has gotten a little bossy at one time in their life, or they've had a bad haircut. The thing that I think we had the most fun with this, Tim, was this like weird fixation on some, what is it, bob cut hairstyle. And of course, I don't even know what that is. And another was bowl cut. What is this, like a Beatles haircut for women or something? But it's like, really? Because they were talking about Karens as, racist and bad haircut. And I'm just thinking, one of those things is not like the other one, but it is this at the same time that we're going to be hypersensitive and try to make political correctness ruin every joke ever told. We are going to make it A-okay to make fun of certain people. As long as they're white people, we can make fun of them. And that I think is a big problem. It changes the nature of our culture. Do not let these things go. I remember several years ago thinking, I'm just tired of hearing anti-white comments. I'm tired of hearing anti-male comments. Look, I know there's plenty of white people who aren't the greatest folks ever. And trust me, I know that anytime I'm defending the male sex, I have to go in knowing a lot of things that it's like a lawyer who goes in and knows, oh, my client may not be guilty of this one. But anyway, I'm kind of joking there. But it's not okay to put people down because of their race, their sex, their haircut. If somebody is a racist, then call them a racist. If someone is a jerk, or I mentioned in this that there's another 5-letter word other than Karen that women might get called a lot that would be appropriate in some of these instances, and there's a similar word for men in the same sort of behavior. So, and maybe we could combine them, for unisex people, but there are words to be used. This is it's okay. You can be a little racist as long as it's against white people. And that, it doesn't work. You can't have a non-racist, healthy society where you permit certain racism and unhealthiness to grow and metastasize. And that's, so this little Karen thing is not just a little throwaway, a little thing to be read in the Urban Dictionary, which also mentioned the bad haircut, that Karens have bad haircuts. It's bigger than that. And I'm glad we called it out.
There's an element that actually bugs me that I forgot all about as we were putting that piece to bed. And that is, it's a generational thing too. It really does identify late baby boomers and Gen Xer women. It's just a kind of woman. Every generation does kind of have a dominant style that we all identify. But generationism, really does bug me.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. And it's not that there's something to it. And you can talk about it as if there's some semblance of something there, but you can't talk about it in a way where you're starting to define people in this way. Very few people, some people are a little rougher or bossier or this or that than others. But if you know people, you know that people have all of these different good and bad traits at one point or another. And it's again, it seems that we want to be able to like slap at people. And why? Why do we have to slap? Why does there have to be this somehow all these people who are of a certain type when we know that that's not true?
One of the problems with anti-racism and anti-sexism as causes is that most people at some point want to be racist and sexist. So when you take it as a cause and you identify the most downtrodden, then the people who fall outside that category of the downtrodden or the oppressed, then they're fair game to revive that kind of racism or sexism. I mean, I think it's just natural because people really do want to be racist and sexist. And, maybe a little bit goes a long way.
And you may mean it that way, but I think what you're talking about is this. We do have a tendency to want to label things and be able to talk about things without specificity. And then, the problem with that is that sometimes leads to doing all kinds of things without specificity of thought. And, but I think that's different than usually when people are talking about racism or sexism. It's like my problem with the word misogyny, a hatred of women. There's some, and there are times where you can make a definition of it that fits that, but it's not always, if you hate people of a certain race, you're a racist. If you use shorthand and stereotypes and categories to make lots of decisions, well, you're going to come down in ways that turn out to be racially biased and kind of stupid. Doesn't mean you're a racist. I wouldn't necessarily call that person a racist. But again, it's not good. And it seems like you point out something that is like the more we get fixated on solving racism and making it such a focus, now all of a sudden everything's race. And that's, what we were trying to get away from.
Yeah, I think you put that one to bed. I've known a number of Karens, and not one of them is a Karen.
And not one of them is this definition?
Exactly.
You broke up just a little bit.
Okay,
No, not me neither. Me neither. I know several Karens, and they don't fit this. But of course, well, anyway, this one's to bed. And stay asleep. That's pet peeve number one. Here's pet peeve number two. And it is a big pet peeve for me. There are two issues on the ballot in Arkansas. And I talked about that on Monday in Lifetime Politicians Ruin Christmas. I'd like that title because it combines the two initiatives, or not initiatives, the legislature put both of them on the ballot. The Arkansas legislature is perhaps the worst legislature in the entire world. They have, for the last 10 years, virtually 10 years, done nothing every session except attempt to gut term limits and destroy the initiative process whereby citizens would petition something like term limits and other reforms that are desperately needed in Arkansas onto the ballot. Well, this year they come with two measures. Years ago, and if you're a longtime reader, you know all about it because I wrote a zillion different commentaries about it. But legislators put on a ballot measure, issue 3, back in 2014. They use the same names, issue, and the same numbers all the time, which is very confusing. And it doesn't bother to mention to people that it's a constitutional amendment. It just says issue. These are all changes the legislature has made to make the process worse. But in 2014, this ballot measure, completely dishonestly worded. The first wording was that it blocks lobbyists from giving gifts to politicians turns out not to be true. They can give all kinds of gifts. They can buy almost every meal is now purchased for legislators by lobbyists if they want it. So a complete lie. It also engineered this new commission that gave legislators 150% pay raise. And of course, that commission was appointed, at least the majority of it, by the legislature, the legislative leaders. This is the sort of stuff they did, but they also changed term limits, and they didn't bother to mention they were changing it. They just said they were enacting term limits. They changed a 6-year House limit and an 8-year Senate limit, both lifetime limits, into a 16-year overall limit. The 16-year, because of certain ways it was written and the way the Arkansas law is, allows some people in the Senate to serve actually 22 years. That's the current system. They've come now with a new initiative, Issue 2, which actually lowers the years. Surprise, surprise. Lowers the years to 12. But get this, stay with me. They end the lifetime limit. So now, and they grandfather all the legislators. All the legislators who've been in or who get elected this year are grandfathered, so they can serve 16 years and then take a break and serve 12 more years. So if you're a legislator who voted for this, and almost all of them did, to put it on the ballot, see if we can trick people again, this is, you present it as we're shortening the limit. What you've really done is to say, not only do I get to serve the 16 years, which we hoodwinked the voters out of, but now I take a short break, I can come back for 12 more. That's 28 years. Oh, and if you take a break after that, and you're a young enough person when you start, you can serve another 12 years. So in essence, you could serve something on the order of 40 plus years in a 50-year period. This is why the term limit, the actual citizens who were pushing to restore the term limits that once existed, passed in 1992 and screwed up in 2014, they've called this the Lifetime Politician Amendment. But it's combined with a measure that makes it tougher to put measures on the ballot. It takes away a grace period, which I didn't mention in the commentary at thisiscommonsense.org, but it takes away a grace period, which is you can turn in signatures, and if you have more than enough to qualify, but you're short, some of them turn out not to be good, you can go back out and get more. It's a good system, especially for grassroots efforts that, don't have millions of dollars to, have thousands of people checking all the signatures. The better heeled special interests, almost any restriction you put in their way, they're going to write a big enough check to get over that hurdle. The hurdles kill grassroots efforts, though, because they just don't have the people to write big checks and get over that. They're not in government for a profit, for their livelihood. They're citizens, and they're trying to reform their government, and they don't have, usually big war chests to do it with. So getting rid of that grace period, or the cure period is sometimes called in some states, is a terrible thing. The upside of it is only, as was said in this commentary, that it'll make it tougher for people to put things on the ballot. If you hate the idea of someone putting something on the ballot and us getting to vote on it, well, then you would like issue 3, which tries to destroy further the petition process. But the other thing that issue 3 does in destroying the petition process is to push the deadline back away from sunny July and to cold, dark January. That means 6 months less of petitioning. It means petitioning instead of in warm weather months, in very cold weather months. And it means swamping the malls and the stores and getting in the way as best as you can to get signatures during the Christmas season. So I'm dubbing issue 3 the Ruined Christmas Amendment. And if you put issue 2 and issue 3 together, what do you have? You've got the Lifetime Politicians Ruined Christmas Amendments. So there you have it. This is, in Arkansas, there have been battles to put things on the ballot. In 2018, as I mentioned in the commentary, citizens put a measure on the ballot. The court came and threw it off afterwards by throwing out literally tens of thousands of signatures by registered voters that were valid, but because of some hyper-technical challenge, the court decided to throw it off in a narrow 4-3 ruling. And that was, their goalkeeping for the legislature there. But this year, every effort to put something on the ballot was defeated by lawsuits and all these completely cumbersome rules. Back in 2010, Citizens in Charge, group I work with, did a report card grading every state on the initiative process. I believe Arkansas came in third place, had a B+, A-, something like that. Excellent process. Few little things that could have been improved. Now I think it would be close to a D or an F. They have just session after session passed restriction after restriction. Why? Because they don't believe in democracy. They believe in them being in charge. And, and I've been to state capitals. I hear more and more how these are decisions that really should be made by legislators and not the people. And my view is every decision the people want to make ought to be made by the people. And legislators ought to decide the issues that people decide they should decide. They work for us. We've lost any conception of that as reality. And Arkansas is the worst, most egregious example. I hope both of these things go down to defeat, but it's tough. There's not a lot of money to campaign against them, and they're worded. If you look at the wording, I didn't address it in this piece. I probably will later on. But if you look at the wording that's on the ballot, it tells you almost zero as to what it actually does. And if citizens petition a measure onto the ballot, they have to tell everything it does. They have to be very comprehensive and clear and not leave anything out. They can be sued up until Election Day to throw it off the ballot, not to change the wording to make it accurate, but to literally take all your work and throw it away if a judge decides that ballot title isn't perfect. But when the legislature puts something on the ballot, they can write the title any way they feel like. Any way they feel like, give the voters just zero information. And that's what they've done on both issue 2 and issue 3. And it just happens again and again that when you think of the election processes, my experience has been that the people working at the polls are the salt of the earth, that with a few obnoxious exceptions, secretaries of state are hardworking, honest, caring public officials who try to get it right. We have all the goodwill going on the election process, but the people who write the rules are politicians, and they write the rules for them and not for us. And it's just an area, when you think about, like I think about this year where so many petitions were suing, trying to be able to do electronic signatures or some other way to deal with the pandemic. All of the electronic signatures, we should have been able to do that 10 years ago or more. The only reason we can't do it, a judge in the Supreme Court in Utah years ago said, yes, they're perfectly valid. And the legislature within weeks had outlawed them. There's no reason we can't do electronic signatures. There's no reason we couldn't have done all kinds of things to make voting not only easier, but also more secure and to protect against the fraud that, of course, none of it ever exists, even though we keep seeing stories about, oh, here's fraud here, here's fraud there. And I'm not suggesting it's widespread or that it's controlling every election. I'm not, screaming and running around like a chicken with his head cut off. But there is fraud, and it seems like we ought to address it. We don't have to go crazy about it. We just have to address it. But again, we live in a time in which, because that's a political issue, our media doesn't really cover fraud in elections. They can't cover it without telling us 57 times that it's not really important, which if it's not really important, why would you cover it? Anyway, that's a long rant to kind of say, again, the whole problem is we've got foxes guarding the hen house. And it really in a pandemic, you see that all the things that could have been done in recent years to make these processes easier and work more smartly, none of them have been done unless they served incumbents' interests.
Well, that's a peeve we know you have. I don't think there's anybody who's ever read anything by you who didn't know you were peeved by politicians who won't obey the basic idea of Democratic-Republican contract, you might say. What's the peeve on Wednesday's piece? Down among the non-sequiturs. Is it just bad memes?
Well, it's interesting. I guess the peeve is people don't think things through. Even basic stuff, they don't think through. And, this one meme, which, usually as I point out here, you don't generally attack someone who did a meme. You attack the president, you attack the head of the UN, you attack Xi Jinping or the Democrats in Congress or the Republicans. You attack the powerful and the things they do. But sometimes a meme can be powerful, and especially a meme that says something that sort of might make sense and sort of might justify really reprehensible behavior. It needs to be called out. And the meme we're talking about, why, and you brought it to my attention, why is murder an appropriate response to property damage, but property damage isn't an appropriate response to murder? Well, first of all, murder is really not the first choice when someone does property damage. I hate to break it to you. I want all police to know that throughout the country and the world. And I'd like everyone else to also just take a moment to remind yourself that murder is not the best response to anything, really. And then I guess if someone is attacking your property, the couple in St. Louis, there have been other cases where someone is attacked. There was the 17-year-old in Kenosha, who we'll see when that goes to trial how much of his defense, I suspect about all of it, will be that he was there, he wasn't violent, he was attacked, and he feared for his life, and he responded. But it's, again, you can respond to violence against you and property damage, like someone smashing in your front door or smashing through your window, is not just property damage. It's kind of damage with possible other things to follow that you don't want to happen. And so, of course you're justified to use force to defend yourself, not so much to defend your property, but that too. People aren't allowed to steal all your stuff. And if someone's stealing all your stuff and won't stop, there are bad consequences that can come from that. But the other response is, or the other, of the three-legged stool, the other stool, whatever. What is it? Leg. There we go. It's late. No. The other leg is that property damage is not really a very good response to murder. It's not a good response if someone was actually murdered. It's not a good response if someone might have been murdered by some public official, like a policeman, doing something he shouldn't have done. I mean, the policeman doing something he shouldn't have done. And it's probably murder, is not the right response, even if the policeman, either way, whether he did something wrong, I've gotten confused here, but whether he did something wrong or didn't do something wrong, that's not the proper response. And if in fact, it'd be one thing if somehow you found the policeman and you went and took, his thermos and smashed it or something, but wouldn't it be better to have rules that stopped him or that put him in jail if he actually murdered someone than to destroy his thermos? And of course, they're destroying a Starbucks. Starbucks didn't do anything. They're destroying a auto supply store. They're destroying a bunch of people's property and livelihood and putting people out of work because someone else was murdered. I mean, it makes no sense. And now that social media is such a big thing, it is important for people to sometimes stand up, because the easiest thing in the world is for everyone to like your friend's meme. But there are times to stand up and say, you know what? This is stupid, and this is justifying bad behavior. And look at it in in the case of Karens. The idea behind it is that somehow they're calling out people who are not, behaving well, and they're keeping order in society. And here they want justice or whatever. In both cases, in the one case, they're justifying bad behavior in terms of being nasty to people. And in the other case, they're justifying their own looting and destruction of property that has nothing to do with anything. And these are being, it's not a bunch of criminals who are posting these memes. It's not a bunch of criminals who use the term Karen. It's regular folks. It's regular folks who are good people, I think, likely, and who we do want to reach. And we do want to get them to stop thinking this way. Because you think that way, oh my goodness, I mean, what could happen next? We could end up with a choice for president like Biden-Trump.
Yeah, and what would happen there? I should mention that I misspoke. That was a Tuesday piece. That was down among the non-sequiturs. Okay. The Wednesday piece was no shock and awe.
And the no shock and awe, we probably could do somewhat short shrift here in the sake of time, in that the whole point of this piece is that we have leaders who have taken this rich, powerful, economic strongman of America and have cut us off at our knees. And it's Trump has done it. Biden is doing it and wants to, raise taxes in all kinds of ways to do it, but not enough to pay for everything, of course. And Trump doesn't want to raise your taxes, but he's still spending everything. Somebody years ago, and I can't remember who it was now, came out and said, the number one issue, maybe it was one of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the number one issue of our military might is the strength of our economy. And if you think you're going to be economically a basket case and be, a country that's running around the world doing things, you're sadly mistaken. The other aspect of this is, in this pandemic, and we've talked about this countless times just in these last few months, the media has never asked where this money's coming from. We've just spent trillions of dollars with very little accountability and with very few questions asked. And so it's for a long time we were approaching, the 100% where our debt equals 100% of our gross domestic product in a given year. And it's now over that because of this pandemic. So again, the lockdowns have put our completely wasteful overspending into overdrive. And, this is something, and there's no talk about there's going to be some sacrifice later. I'm sure that as soon as this is over, there's going to be some new reason to spend $1 zillion. We will fail as a country. And there's an awful lot of poor people who did nothing wrong who will suffer because, we've had politicians who have been able to get away with giving away benefits that someone has to pay for later on. I mean, look, if you were a store and you got to get all your stuff, all your supplies without paying, you just said, look, we'll pay in 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 80 years after we're dead. Somebody else will pay. And you then sold them or gave them away. And I mean, that's what politicians are doing in essence, is they're giving us all kinds of things without having to tax us for it, because they're doing it on the credit card and they'll tax us later. And they'll tax our kids and our great grandkids. And of course, we don't topple overnight. There's all kinds of reasons. But at some point, this can't continue. And especially, on steroids like it has been.
Yeah. My big worry has always been that, people think that money is wealth. And so if you just spend more money, you're just creating something. That's been behind so much of the nonsense demanding, the various bailouts and so forth. When new money is created by debt, it's wealth that we have now that's being distributed. So somehow wealth is on the line. And like you were saying, is it going to be taxed? One of my fears is that they're planning to do something to change everything. Have you heard of the Great Reset?
Yes.
Some people are talking about that there's a plan, or there are many plans, or they're trying to figure out a way to just reshuffle everything. And
the wealth taxes are at least a little bite at that. And of course, could be ramped up to where all of a sudden these wealth taxes are expropriation of your wealth.
Yeah.
We're no longer taxing the top 0.1%, 0.01%. We're taxing maybe the top 5%. And we're not just taxing, we're taking everything you've got beyond a certain amount. And that's, it's when you talk about rich people as evil, when you don't point out anything wrong they did other than to be successful, you are setting the stage for some ugly, ugly behavior, and not behavior. I know some people will get all in their revolutionary, excitement, but this is not behavior that helps the poor. It is not behavior that helps the poor. The Soviet Union didn't pull a lot of people out of poverty. Pol Pot did not create a wonderful society in Cambodia. And in fact, the society that seems to have created the most wealth and pulled the most people out of poverty and pulls the most people to its shores who want to go there instead of are trying to escape is the United States of America. And it's funny because sometimes I feel like, people are going, oh, well, you and your super patriotic, I'm not a big flag waver. I do kind of believe that patriotism is, the last vestige of the scoundrel or something like that. I probably got that messed up, but I don't, it's not like America, love it or leave it. Let's criticize America all we want. But why would you pretend things that aren't true? I mean, it's like in the Cold War. I wouldn't justify what the United States was doing in Central America and throughout most of the 20th century, or all. And but that doesn't mean I thought that somehow the Soviet Union was better because we're bad, they have to be better or something. And it's, when you look, I look today at, I oftentimes we've done so much on China, the China Nazis and Hong Kong and so on. And, I have people argue, well, it's just a different system. This is insanity. We just had an ambassador. He was an ambassador during George W. Bush and Obama. Roy was ambassador to China, come out and basically say that there was no genocide, that calling what's happening with the Uyghurs genocide is outrageous and stupid and foolish. At most, it's cultural genocide. I'm thinking, I'm thinking, oh, you've got a heck of an argument there, Ambassador. It's certainly not. It's not genocide. Oh, technically, yes, it's not genocide. They're not trying to kill every last man, woman, and child. It's just a certain kind of genocide. I feel so much better now. Um, anyway, that's it. People people do not appreciate freedom nearly enough, and people will delude themselves. I think that since Tiananmen Square, uh, we have either deluded ourselves that somehow trading with China was going to free them, or we deluded ourselves into thinking that we could have this partner who was a totalitarian thug. And I kind of think of how much would we want to trade with the Nazis if they were still going. Well, it strikes me as so much the same thing. They do the same things. They have concentration camps, and if maybe I'll do something on this for next week. If they, because the idea here is that we're not actually gassing them, we're not torturing them that much. We just forcibly sterilize them, or we do this, and it's like, I'm thinking, who talks about that as if that's somehow some difference you would care about? This is thuggery and tyranny and the sickest, most disgusting form of government you could possibly have. Let's not, kind of discuss the fine points between, Stalin and Hitler. Well, Stalin didn't starve 12 million people in the Ukraine. It was only 11.5 million. So he really wasn't such a bad guy. It just drives me crazy. And to think that a former ambassador would be out there saying things that basically are pro-China, anti-US. And to me, I have talked this whole time during Trump's time about Gorsuch being the number one argument for Trump. And I think that's probably still true. But I have to say that for me personally, more and more, the China issue and his willingness to confront them, I don't know that he's confronted them in all the ways that I would want him to. I don't know what's in his heart or his head half the time. But I do know this. He has confronted the Chinese totalitarians in a way that no other American administration has. And they need to be confronted. We need to be realistic and real about who they are and what they're doing and take action.
Well, I don't think your position on the Chinese is a peeve. I think it goes sort of transcends peeve.
I'm with you there.
On Thursday, you went from the frightening to the ridiculous. Despacito, Desperation.
I was calling it Despacito. Despacito.
I've heard people who seem to know Spanish say Despacito.
Well,
I never took Spanish. I took German, so I'm not going to pronounce it like a German.
I took Spanish in high school, but it didn't quite take. I wish I would have paid better attention. But this is Joe Biden who picks this song. And of course, it's this kind of sexy song. And somehow Joe Biden's people, they just have to work a little bit harder, kind of Google a little bit more about different things. But the real issue here is pandering, and that we're just constantly pandered to. And of course, when Hillary Clinton, as I pointed out in this commentary, in 2016, she goes on the Breakfast Club, the Charlemagne the God is the guy who heads it up. Interesting name. Anyway, she went on and talked about it. If people, I'm sure you do remember, because it was so just pathetic. But she talked about how she carries hot sauce with her in her purse, which, all kinds of people carry stuff like hot sauce. I always think of like Monty Hall and what was that? Let's Make a Deal. He was always at the end of the show asking people, who has hot sauce in their purse or something like that. Maybe it wasn't hot sauce. Maybe it was silver dollars. It's a different time than in America. But anyway, but everyone knew just kind of instinctively she's lying, that she doesn't. Hillary Clinton, if she wanted hot sauce, it wouldn't be in her purse. She'd have an aide who had all kinds of, who'd have to throw away different things in their purse so that they could carry extra hot sauce for Hillary. I mean, that's how, maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong about Hillary. That's how it works with every other numbskull congressman or big shot in Washington.
I can see Huma Abedin taking hot sauce in her purse, in her third purse for Hillary.
Huma, where's my, come on. Where's my hot sauce? Anyway, Joe Biden, picking this song, it's just silly. And the whole goal is to be relatable, for them to know that you're just like them. And of course, what does it show? It shows that you're nothing like us, because we don't pander to people all the time. And because, think about someone who's going to be president of the United States, or not, in the case of Hillary Clinton, thank goodness. But think about what it says, that person thinks hot sauce is like really important to you as a Latino. And I just think that's, talk about just damning with kind of this view that their whole life is about, the taco or something. Get real. And the same with, Biden and instead of trying to suck up, why don't you come up with some, hey, here's what good things I could do that would help you. And I kind of hate it all aimed at Hispanics or blacks or women, or, couldn't you do stuff that would help everybody across the board? We'll set fair rules for everyone. But it's I don't like that, but it's interesting. I think this is a sign of how scared Biden is about the Hispanic vote. And especially, Biden is doing pretty well in Florida. Trump, I think, won it by a couple points, maybe a little bit more than a couple points in 2016. But it's been pretty solid for him in the sense that, he's done well there all along. It's not a huge Republican majority, but it tends to be a Republican majority. In 2018, when the country was going much more Democrat, Florida, DeSantis as governor was won, close race, but won. So, Biden has been looking better, but the underbelly is that he's not doing very well with Hispanics. And there's a huge influx of people from Puerto Rico because of the hurricane and all the problems in Puerto Rico. And so there are more Hispanic voters. They're a little bit bigger slice of the pie. And yet Trump is doing very, very well compared to a lot of Republicans against Biden. And it'll be interesting to see if that happens other places. It was a big surprise to folks that Bernie Sanders did better among Hispanics than a lot of the other Democrats. So interesting.
We probably should reiterate the title, Despacito, Desperation, and that's your point, is that he's getting desperate, and it shows.
Yes, and what's interesting is we've talked about the debate so much, and just before we kind of close again this week, I can't remember who I was listening to, but on the radio, people were talking about after one debate, if Biden does all right, he may skip the other two debates, and frankly, and one of the hosts said something that I thought was really interesting. He said, this guy, Biden, has been in Washington for 47 years, making policy, running for office, debating people, debating as vice president twice, national stage, running for president several different times throughout his career. And Donald Trump, who's run for office one time, been on the debate stage with other Republicans, and then his 3 debates with Hillary. But that the expectation is that if Biden somehow can end the debate without having a moment, kind of a deer in the headlights moment, where he can't come up with words, that it's a victory for Biden. And he was just saying that, that's so odd that here, that's Biden's whole life. I mean, Trump was a business guy. He was a reality TV, he did different things, but debating political issues was not what he was doing. And I thought, that's absolutely right. And again, look at the expectations that get created. And in part because maybe the media wants those to be the expectations, but also in part because people do have, and it's interesting because you had it 4 years ago with Hillary Clinton and people ignoring different reports that she had slipped or she seemed to lose her place or, whatever, was just having different issues. And then there was the issue of her getting into the limousine in New York where it looked like she fell and they kind of grabbed her and all of a sudden that became a big deal. Well, with Biden, those aren't just, rumors that are being debunked until they prove it. We're debunking those until they prove to be true. And then we go, oh, shucks. But they're out there. Everybody sees it. And of course, some people say, I hate Donald Trump enough, I'm going to vote for Biden anyway. And I think people who like Donald Trump are going to vote for him. And I think people in the middle, if you're not sure at this point who you're voting for, the debates could be a big deal just in whether you think Biden is like cognitively all there. And I just, I think, what is the rest of the world? It's like, we call ourselves, I don't, and I guess most of us probably don't call ourselves superpower, but that's the Washington, we're the world superpower that might elect somebody who's not quite there. And at least half the country believes we've already elected somebody who's not quite there. So isn't this fun? Pet peeves and then just regular pathetic politics.
This has been This Week in Common Sense for the second week of September 2020. My name is Timothy Virkala. I thank you for joining us. Please register your likes and click bells and all those kind of things on whatever platform you're viewing this on or listening to this on. We're on many podcatchers. We're on SoundCloud. We're on YouTube. Thanks for stopping by.